This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien kicks off today's show with this week's grain market update. He discusses what is currently happening with the world wheat market and how he thinks it will look in the future. Continuing the show is Frontier District livestock production agent Rod Schaub and crop production and farm management agent Ryan Schaub to explain how agriculture is doing in their district. A weather update from K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond completes today's show. He says we can expect to cool off after the recent above-average temperatures. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Friday show, as we always do, with a grain market update, and we're joined with K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien for that update. Dan, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby. I appreciate the chance to speak with you.
Dan, kicking off our grain market conversation, as we always do, with what are futures looking like?
Well, we're certainly in a normal harvest season pattern for our fall harvested crops. And again, corn yesterday, East corn 2023 closed at $4.79 basically sideways down, down 0.75 cents, just marginally. And we've been trading around we had gotten up to just under 5.10 for a brief moment within the last week and a half. Have come back down to about the average or the middle, lower. It's a little bit below the middle of this range we've been trading in, on the low from 470 up to a high of about 510. So we're kind of drifting within that range, really looking for more market news, and that news could come when we have the November the 9th, as I understand it, next set of USDA crop production and WASDE reports. So without any new hard data coming in, we're just sort of ambiguously, I shouldn't say just drifting, but we're just sort of thrashing around in the middle of that range. And again, pretty typical of harvest time frame. Of course, the other major futures contract that we're watching, it would be November soybeans as an indicator of where that market's at. Closed on Thursday at 12.79.5, down about 8.75 cents. Anymore, that's just within the range of normal volatility and variability in the soybean market, but a little less of a pronounced longer term range or intermediate term range for soybeans than for corn. But generally, we've been trading from about 12.50 to about 13.25. It's just pretty well defined range. The number on yesterday's close at 12.79.5, just in the middle, just hanging around. Again, and the harvests are progressing. That's probably the thing to bring up on this. For soybeans are, I guess, the numbers as of the last part of, would have been last Sunday. The national number was about 40% harvested. Soybeans in Kansas were about 71. And I think that when we are affected by drought, it's a lot easier to go more quickly in terms of harvest. And we've certainly seen that for soybeans in Kansas. The national U.S. corn harvest number, again, which would have been on October the 22nd when that last number came out, we were at about 59% harvested. The Kansas number, again, was at 82. And again, I just repeat, that's the impact of a dry year. You don't have as much quantity to go through, and you add into that on the fringes, in some cases, fields that aren't harvested because of one set of difficulties or another, and you end up with that. I always try to watch also grain sorghum, following closely with corn. We're at, for grain sorghum, nationally for that, we're at about 67% harvested, actually a little bit ahead of corn. Here in Kansas, we're 57% harvested. So, we Midwesterners, we generally are pretty used to seeing the corn come out first, and then the grain sorghum often take just a little bit longer to mature, to dry down, etc. So in Kansas, that's playing out. The corn's coming out first, grain sorghum following. So I guess back to the future side, we're in a harvest mode for those two crops, and that's put us at the situation, I think, where many farmers are looking to the cash markets. They'll be, if they're not satisfied with these prices, if they're not driven by cash flow needs, they're probably storing grain and wondering about the opportunities then for post-harvest gains that would come about from that approach to marketing.
And Dan, you mentioned the cash market, and so what numbers are we seeing there?
Again, kind of drifting prices that cover costs in most cases with okay yields. But for those that were caught short yield-wise with lesser units just to spread the monetary expenses over, probably, again, sideways to perhaps not covering costs if they were caught short on the yield side. But cash prices for corn right here during harvest, again, you run from a high. This is as of Thursday the 26th, yesterday, a high of 504 in the Garden City area, positive 25-cent basis, a low or a couple lows in the Topeka and Columbus areas of 459, again, about 20 cents under. We're at the place now, we'll compare what we have now for corn harvests to what the market is offering a year from now, just to get some idea of where people think things might go. And in those cases, we do see Dees corn for 2024 actually at 509, current Dees corn 479.5. So that might just be the uncertainty of what we don't know what's going to happen in 2024. But as we sit today, you've got about a 30-cent higher Dees 2024 corn market than where you're at now, and because of that, some I guess I call them partially attractive new crop bids for that. Although it'd be out of the ordinary to see many Kansas farmers forward contracting for next year when they haven't even got most of this year's crop out yet. Yet that's out there to watch. I would just say quickly for grain sorghum, continuing the trend of grain sorghum prices in a number of these export-oriented areas being pretty strong relative to current corn. That stands out the most actually in Salina, Topeka areas, where you've got about a 20 to 30 or in some cases 40-cent higher bid. When you got a strong bid that jumps up, somebody's probably filling a train someplace, or they have a commitment they're trying to fill. And the new crop bids for grain sorghum, actually, they're just at or below where the corn bids are. So just take that into account for thought. Soybean bids, again, when farmers are used to seeing 13s and 14s on soybean prices, now they see a high bid in the Topeka market at 1249, Salina at 1239, Hutchinson also 1249, and then other places about 1190 thereabouts. Again, the Colby, Garden City, Columbus bid at 1220. So again, you've got a situation where it's still historically a very, very good price. We may tend not to want to store beans as much in Kansas for longer periods of time. I'm not saying people don't, but we tend to move them more so, would be my understanding. So you've got historically very good prices, but given what we've just experienced in the last 12 to 16 months, lower than our reference price that we'd like to have. And then soybean new crop bids for next year actually are lower than bids for this year. And November 2024 soybeans at 1257, November 23 at 1279.5. So the market in some small way is signaling that, hey, we think we're going to have a lot of soybeans next year. And when you do look at the new crop bid price ratios, they do, for new crop corn versus new crop soybeans, they're favoring soybeans way out there in 2024. So I guess that's just where it's at. And just to mention wheat market has its own set of international struggles that we could talk about if you wanted to. Generally, the wheat prices have been on a trend lower since August, generally in kind of a tortured manner, and closed yesterday at $6.54 had been at around $6.75 to $7 not that long ago. And so I think that to try to just summarize in a big statement, wheat coming out of Europe that is priced to move, that needs to move, that can't just go into storage, is coming out onto the world markets, and not only coming into the U.S., but as that wheat substitutes pretty readily for hard red winter wheat, it is not just only coming into the U.S., but also going into other places in the world, competing very strongly with our U.S. product, and puts us in not a very good competitive situation at this time. You and I talked before we came on the air, so what is this the new norm? And I guess I'm beginning to think of it more like if we keep having a situation where as they grow crops over there in Ukraine and they come out quick onto the market and they're hard to compete with, it may be more like a Brazil soybean situation to where eventually, yes, the U.S. does have some pretty good export markets, but we may have to wait, and the rest of the other sellers in the world may have to wait until these really cheaply priced to sell and move soybeans out of Europe get off the market, and then there'll be more room. So at least those are my thoughts right now on that, Shelby.
And Dan, as we round out today's conversation, then talking a little bit more about that wheat world market, is it fair to say that it's basically kind of flooded right now?
It's short-term flooded, and you and I have talked about how the longer-term numbers are not that great. And in fact, they're very, very tight, very poor, and it makes a hand-wringing economist, which I guess they pay us to wring our hands and worry about things. I guess I have the attitude of this that we're really focusing myopically on just what's available right in front of us and really not seeing at all the challenges that are a little just beyond that. And the world wheat market's as tight as it's been since 2007, 2008, if the numbers aren't just off. So I guess the market may not recognize that until you'd have a drought in the Black Sea region, and those supplies, which are flooding the market from both Russia and Ukraine, if they'd be shortened up, then what right now we're counting on, and kind of myopically, again, just lots and lots of cheap wheat wouldn't be there. And we look around and say, gosh, there's not a lot of wheat anywhere else either. So anyway, that's one way to try to piece at least my thoughts together on the world wheat market and what we're seeing right now.
Dan, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and give us a grain market update.
Thank you very much, Shelby. I appreciate it.
That was K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Friday show with agents who are currently at the K-State Research and Extension Annual Conference. And today, we're joined with Frontier District Crop Production and Farm Management Agent Ryan Schaub and Livestock Production Agent Rod Schaub. Rod, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Fantastic. Thanks for having us on. Yeah, glad to do it.
And Ryan, kicking off our conversation with, what is agriculture in your region?
So we have soybeans and corn mostly. We'll plant some few acres of wheat, and then we have a little bit of milo, seeing a little bit more milo in the last couple of years, mostly due to drought.
And Rod, how has the weather been in your area this past year?
Well, we've been really dry. We had some rain early in there in April, May time period, and then it just kind of run out. And we have been relatively dry until yesterday. And yesterday we had a nice rain, 5 or 6, 7, 8 inches of rain. So
hoping to see some sprucing up a little bit in the Frontier District then?
Hopefully everything didn't die.
And so focusing just kind of on crops and talking through what you've seen this past year. And first, looking at harvest, and corn and wheat in your area is done, basically.
Yeah, corn's going to be pretty well done. Corn yields actually, even though we were fairly dry, surprised me a little bit with some yields. There was some really good acres. There were some bad spots as well, don't get me wrong. But as the most part, I'd say we've seen above average or average to above average yields, which, again, just the year really surprised me. Wheat, I would say it was, again, about average. Nothing just great, but did pretty good there. So
seeing nothing exemplary, but just kind of holding steady.
Yeah, it's for the most part. I mean, nothing just amazing, but just kind of keeping us going and going to get us a chance to plant next year.
The good ground produced pretty good crops. The upland ground, those were a little more questionable. They were under a little more drought stress and didn't feel as good as, some of the deeper soil locations in the county.
Other couple crops in your area, first one being soybeans.
Yeah, soybeans are one of those crops that if you got a rain late, might have made some beans, but that range is kind of all over the board. I've heard as low as 8 bushel, but been hearing some 45s, but mostly probably in that 25 to 30 bushel an acre kind of yields. Maybe not as great as we were anticipating when we planted them this spring, but with the year that we had, again, we have to be pretty happy with that. So.
And is soybean harvest almost done in your area or still taking place?
Yeah, we're going to be wrapping up. I mean, there's going to be a few acres left, but I would say we're 85, 90% done. I think we've got a lot of ours kind of taken out. So.
And the last crop really in your area that you mentioned is milo.
Yeah, milo. I think there was more acres probably of milo the last 2 years than the previous 10. But yields, I don't have a great idea. I've heard a few yields, but I don't know how well that would be represented across the district there. So.
And is that continued drought maybe the reason you've seen a little bit more milo?
That, and I think the ethanol plant taking some milo in as well gives them a place to go. Maybe they were able to get a little more money there than corn. I mean, I don't know exactly the reason, but I think a lot of it has to go back to just drought and that tolerance of drought. So.
Rod, you've been in the Frontier District for quite a few years, and so has that milo planting changed a lot over these past years?
Well, it really has. You know, I started in '89, and at that point, we had a lot of milo. There was probably as many acres of milo planted then as there is corn now, and so it's just kind of flip-flopped. So, yeah, we have way more corn now, and the milo acres have really decreased.
And so now kind of flipping to your side of work, Rod, with being a livestock production agent, what livestock are you seeing in your area?
Well, we mainly have cow-calf operations. There's a few people that run a few stockers, but it's not like just another 30 miles west of us, you know, where they're in the Flint Hills. There's a lot more stockers. But where we're at is mostly cow-calf operations.
And we've mentioned the drought that you guys had for a while, which hopefully the rain has helped with that. But did you see cattle producers reducing their numbers this year?
Yeah, actually, we actually did. We were at a sale barn one day, and a whole bunch of cows came in that had mud all over their backs. The guy said he was done. He was just getting out of the cow business. He said he didn't have any more water, and so it made an issue, you know. And so we've seen guys that have decreased their cow herd somewhat. You know, the drought, forages, all of that is an issue when we're in a drought situation. So.
I'm sure you're hoping to see some rain this next year, but hoping to see those cattle producers shift into keeping their numbers or maybe even seeing expansion?
Well, and that's kind of what the economics is going to lead us to, I think, you know, because if you look at the cattle prices, they're high. And so, yeah, I think ultimately over time, but we need to think about what we're going to be doing to our grass, too, because if our grass has been really stressed, I'm not sure that increasing our numbers on a drought-stressed pasture is maybe the best thing for the grass, okay?
Overall, how are your ag producers in your area?
I would say they're doing fairly well. Prices, livestock-wise at least, are really, really good right now. Row crops, yeah, we didn't get the yields. Prices are, again, allowing us to kind of at least maintain, and we're just kicking that can down the road and going to continue to just throw it out there and see what happens again next year. I think our producers are a little more optimistic looking at the yields that we got this fall compared to what maybe we had anticipated going into it, because I think there was a negative mindset going into harvest, and I think some of that was relieved when we got into the fields, actually. So.
And actually, we were a little better off starting this year than maybe our neighbors to the south of us or to the west of us. Last year, we actually had decent crops, and so that kind of helped the farm situation. And then this year, like Ryan said, I think that we have had better yields than what most of them anticipated. And so you match that with price, and things maybe aren't real rosy, but they're way better than they could have been.
That sounds like some good news then. And so for people who are in the Frontier District, which is on the eastern part of the state, do you guys have any programs upcoming that they could come to?
We do have a meeting coming up. It's November the 13th. It's Ways to Stretch Your Forage Resources. And so we're going to talk a lot there about what can we do? How can we limit feed the cows? Can we replace hay with some grain? You know, how can we incorporate using rumensin into our diet? So those are some of the kind of the things we're going to talk about. Just ways to try to stretch that forage resource a little bit further, because this year hay prices, I think, are going to be high still again. So, that's kind of what we're trying to cover at that meeting.
And for people who'd like to find out more information about the meeting, where can they do that?
You can get onto our Facebook site, Frontier District. We post a lot of our upcoming meetings there. You can find some of our information also on our website, Frontierdistrict.ksu.edu. There will also be some flyers, news releases there for any of our upcoming meetings.
Rod, Ryan, I appreciate you both taking the time to join us today and share with us some information about the agriculture in the Frontier District.
Thank you for having us.
It's been our pleasure. Thank you.
That was K-State Crop Production and Farm Management Agent Ryan Schaub and Livestock Production Agent Rod Schaub, both from the Frontier District. I will link the resources that Ryan mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Before we cut to a break, we're going to be joined by USDA's Rod Bain as he discusses the National Animal Health Laboratory Network that's made up of USDA and land-grant university labs.
It's a new partnership among the nation's animal health and biodefense facilities to improve early detection of emerging animal diseases. This is Christy Loyacano, coordinator of the National Animal Health Laboratory Network within USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service.
We are going to identify 5 scientists and place them in 5 of our non-laboratories around the country with the intent of them to take their region, look at the threats both nationally and internationally, do risk assessments, and then make sure that the laboratories that are non-laboratories within their region have the capability to respond to those threats.
Chosen labs will partner with the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility.
We're partnering with NBAF and their expertise in the foreign animal disease diagnostics and utilizing what NALM can provide in that partnership.
Each participating laboratory offers a specific area of study based on region and scientific category.
We have 3 level 1 laboratories, which is the highest level of our non-laboratories. They take on the most responsibility and typically do the most testing for us.
Those facilities include the New York State Veterinary Diagnostic Lab at Cornell University.
They do focus on multiple species and will be developing assays both on the serologic and molecular side of things.
Michigan State University's Vet Diagnostic Lab,
a multi-species leader, and they'll focus on whole genome sequencing, which is an up-and-coming area for diagnostics.
And the Washington State Animal Disease Diagnostic Laboratory.
They're going to focus a little more on avian and aquaculture as well as the wildlife interface, so the interface between domestic species and wildlife.
The remaining 2 facilities, level 2 sites, are based in Virginia and Arizona.
We have Virginia Tech Animal Laboratory Services. They're actually going to focus on swine and small ruminants as well as bovine. So looking more at the livestock side of things and focusing on molecular epidemiology and molecular diagnostics. Out in the Southwest, we have Arizona Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory. They are going to be looking between Mexico and U.S. border. They'll be looking along diagnostics and interfacing with indigenous people along the border, and also looking at next generation whole genome sequencing.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
We're now cutting to a short break on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Friday show with a weather update with K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Chip, as we look at the weather, first looking at how warm temperatures we've had really across the state.
It has been warm, especially in central and east Kansas, where we've had just a big influx of moisture and cloud cover to keep these solar radiation that does reach the ground in, and it's been very warm when we think about our normal temperatures in the middle 60s for highs, and then in the 40-degree range to upper 30s for our lows, and we have been well above that for much of the state, with temperatures really not dropping below 60 for even overnight lows. So when we're talking overnight lows, staying that warm, and that's comparable to our afternoon highs on normal. We have been much above normal, and it's been warm, humid, and definitely kind of a spring-like feel.
And with those consistently above average temperatures, did that set a record for Manhattan?
It actually set a few records, a few minimum temperature records. It's been so warm, we're setting record warm minimums. So as Thursday morning, for instance, we set a new record in Manhattan where 62 degrees broke the old record of 61 for the highest overnight low temperature ever on this date. And then we're also looking at consecutive days of warm temperatures where we've been above the 60-degree mark as of Thursday morning. We were above since Sunday morning. So that's 4 days straight of above normal temperatures and very steady temperatures with very little diurnal variation from the afternoon to the evening. And so it's 100 hours plus. We expect around 112 before the cold front came through Friday morning. That would be a new record for this late in the year to see that many hours consecutive of above 60 degrees.
Last week, Chip, you mentioned that we should be seeing some moisture with Hurricane Norma, and that's something we did see this week.
Yeah, we've got a stalled out system, a stationary front that kind of splits Kansas a little bit further north and west of center Kansas. So western Kansas has been a little bit drier, and they've seen a lot less moisture, and they've gotten a little cooler. But along and east of that stationary front, central and eastern Kansas, the reason for this higher humidity and this persistent temperatures has been from Norma. All that moisture basically got pushed northward out ahead of the system and is funneling along that stationary front and then just to the east. So it's been the reason we've seen these warmer temperatures and precipitation. Granted, precipitation trends across the state are varied. Highest totals were in the Flint Hills east to the Kansas City area, where some areas saw 6 inches of rain on the mesonet. And then on Cocoras, there were some totals exceeding 10 to even 12 inches of rain, especially in the central Lyons County into Osage County. Too much rain. As a result, we have that prominent tropical moisture. We can really effectively create precipitation and drop it, especially if it trains over the same area.
And on the topic of hurricanes, Hurricane Otis is showing just how difficult things can be to predict this time of year.
Yeah, Norma moved on, fizzled, and all that moisture moved northward, and Hurricane Otis formed in its wake. And almost the same place off the southwest Mexico. It completely blew all the forecasters' minds. It went from, it was expected to be a tropical storm. When it formed, it was. And then it was expected to make landfall in about a 24-hour period as a tropical storm. Well, it rapidly intensified. It went from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane and just decimated parts of southwest Mexico. And that completely defied all forecast models and all forecasters and what they expected. And as a result, shows just how volatile and challenging this time of year is forecast-wise, because it both fall and spring, we're in that transition season, and it's really hard to tell projections out into the future. And that, I think Otis was a great example of that. Granted, we live in the central United States, so we are a little bit more predictable weather-wise, but definitely a little bit more uncertainty always surrounds the forecast until we get into about the middle of November.
And Chip, as we've looked what we have had this past week, what can we expect moving forward?
Yeah, with this cold front, with very cold temperatures, we'll have a very widespread freeze in middle 20s on Sunday morning, and will be cold through early next week. And temperatures start to rebound back up as high pressure builds in, and overall prevailing drier conditions after some precipitation on Saturday will be established through next week.
That was K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. That's all we have for you this week on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you on Monday.